Hello and welcome to my first tutorial video. Today I'm going to teach you how to create a tool that spawns parts in the game. So it's going to start off pretty beginner and then as we progress through it, it's going to get a little bit more challenging, but it shouldn't be anything too far out of the realm of the beginner category. So I'm going to hit stop and we can start to put everything together for this. So the first thing you're going to want to do is head over to the starter player over here in the Explorer. So I've got my Explorer open. If you don't see the Explorer, under the View tab, you can click Explorer and that will come up with the Explorer here. So we'll go to the starter pack and then we will right click on the starter pack and do Insert Object. So we'll click this and we're looking for a tool. Now I frequently use the tool object, so if you don't see it here, you can come up and type in tool and it should come up for you. And then you'll click it and it will create a tool in the starter pack. So there's a few properties in the tool. The only one that we're really concerned with right now is the requires handle. So we'll want to uncheck this. And in the tool, we're going to want to right click and click Insert Object. And this time we're going to insert a script. Again, you can search it up here and it will come up with a script. There are 3 different types of scripts. We just want the script. So this will come up with the classic print hello world. We're going to delete this and then we are going to start writing our code for our part spawning tool. So the first step in this is to create a variable that refers to our tool itself. So the variable can be created by going local tool equals script.parent, and that will give us a reference to this tool object here. After you've created your tool variable, you'll want to come over here down a couple lines and type in tool.activated, and ROBLOX is helpful and it gives me suggestions for what it thinks I'm going to type next, and so this is what I'm going to type. So I can just hit tab on my keyboard and that will complete that for me, and then I'm going to do :connect, and it already knows again that I'm going to type connect, so I'll just hit tab again, connect, and it gave me my parentheses, which is what I'm going to need here. Inside of the parentheses I'm going to type function and more parentheses, okay, and then I'll hit enter, and again ROBLOX is helping me out here. It will come up with the end. So inside of this we are going to say local part equals instance.new part, and what this does is it creates a part, which is exactly what we want our tool to do. So we've created a variable calling to create a new part. Now we can create the part, but the part doesn't really know where to exist. So we'll hit enter again and we'll type part.parent equals a workspace. Now the part knows I need to exist in the workspace, and the workspace is the physical world, right? The workspace is everything we see in here. So as we can see, if we open up the workspace, right, I've got it opened up here, we can see that there's a spawn location, which is where people spawn, and we've got all of the different objects in here. So we've got the base plate, which is the full thing, and then a part here for the guide to join the blob mob. If you're not in the blob mob, you should join the blob mob. This is the community I've created for you to join me and to chat and be a part of the community. All that we're concerned with right now is that our part is going to be created in the workspace. So that's everything we need. And really this actually accomplishes exactly what we set out to do. When we activate it on the computer that would be clicking, it is going to create a part in the workspace. So we can go ahead and test our game here. And we can see now we've got a tool. And as soon as we select our tool, we can start clicking and parts will start spawning. Now you'll notice the parts are actually spawning at the spawn. And that's because the spawn is positioned at the origin of the world, and since we haven't specified where we want the parts to generate in our script, they're just spawning at the world origin, so they're coming up right here as I'm clicking. The next step would be to tell the script that we want to create the part where our mouse is pointing. So we'll go ahead and stop here, and then we'll come down to our script and disable this enabled piece so our script doesn't run, and then now what we need to do is create the part wherever our mouse is clicking. In order to do that, we are going to right click, insert object, and this time we can search script again, and we want a local script. So we're going to click local script, and then it will open up the local script for us. I'm going to exit out of my script tab here, and we'll get rid of this once again. To keep track of our scripts, I'm going to rename this one to spawn at mouse. Okay, and that's just for my reference. So this time around, again, we're going to want to do the same thing. We'll create a variable that references our tool. So we'll say local tool equals script.parent. But this time we need to get the player's mouse. And in order to get the player's mouse, you have to have a local script because the player is responsible for their own mouse. The local script is in charge of knowing where the mouse is pointed. So I'm going to create a variable to call the mouse. I will say local mouse equals game.players.localPlayer :get mouse. And what this does is it's Roblox's method of getting the mouse for the player. So we've officially created a variable reference to the player's mouse. So now this is going to look very similar to the other script. I'm just going to type tool.activated :connect function parentheses, and this is exactly what we did in our other script actually. From here, once again, we need to generate a part, so we'll say local part equals instance.new parentheses quotation marks part. And then we need to tell the part where it needs to be parented to in order for it to exist. So we'll tell it part.parent equals workspace. And then this time we're going to tell the part exactly where we want it to be positioned. So we'll type in part.position equals mouse.hit.position. So what this means is that the part is going to be positioned at the mouse's hit position. And hit is just the Lua coding way of saying where the mouse was clicked in the physical world. So that will be everything we need to spawn a part at the mouse's position. And so we'll go back to our creations game here and we'll hit play. And we've got an error. Local player is not a valid member of players. So the issue here is I didn't capitalize the P in local player. So this is a gentle reminder to me that capitalization matters when you're coding. So I need to change this back to local player, and see Roblox is telling me you need a capital P here. So we'll click that. Sometimes Roblox will do this, so we're just gonna delete this, and this is everything we need. So we'll go back and hit play again. This time I don't have any errors, and I'll click my tool. And then now when I click somewhere on the screen, I expect that a part will appear there, and it does. So I'm clicking and parts are appearing exactly where I click. Now this is very nice because I can just create parts in the workspace wherever I want them to appear. So if I want to climb up on my little how to join the blob mob over here, I can just run over here and start clicking beneath myself, and now I've created myself a little tower to get up to the top here. And then I can jump on top, and now I'm on top of the billboard, and I can continue to create parts wherever I want them to be. And I can create them literally at any distance. I can create them way out here. So this is great and all, but there's an issue, and this is where it starts to get a little more advanced. If I were to be in a server with other players, we can simulate that by clicking this button up here. Local server, 2 players is what I want. We'll click this button. And now we've got 2 players in a game, right? So I've got this player 1 and I've got player 2 over here on the left. And what we can see now is if I click my tool, I can start clicking, creating parts, and you'll notice something strange happening, right? I'm getting parts on my end, on player 1's end, but player 2 is not seeing those parts. He's seeing player 1 in the air, but he's not seeing the parts down here. And it's confusing for this player because this player can also click around and create parts, right? But player 1 is not seeing those parts. And now on each other's screen, they're levitating on their own screen. They're on top of parts, and it's confusing. And what's also interesting is player 1 can interact with the parts on player 2's screen. So I'm seeing parts down here, right? If player 1 runs through these, he ran through it like nothing happened. But you'll notice over here, those parts got knocked over. And the same thing could happen over here, right? So on player 1's screen, I see I've got parts here. Player 2 does not see those parts here. But if I run into those parts, boop, I'm interacting with them. Even though I don't see them, player 1 does. Now, this can actually be useful in some games. I've created a game where this is actually applicable, and certain players can see parts that they've created while other players cannot see it. So it's only registered locally and not on the server, which is actually useful for the purposes of that game. And so I'll link that game in the description. But for now, we want parts that actually everybody can see. So this is not what we want. So we'll go ahead and hit cleanup up here to get rid of both of those games. And now we're going to get into the complicated side of things, which is events. So we'll come down here and we will disable this script. And we're going to create a new script here. So we're going to right click on our tool once again, hit insert object. We'll type in script and we will select the local script. Okay, this time what I'm actually going to do is once again get rid of the print hello world, and I'll come back to my spawn at mouse script, and I'm going to copy all of this because we're going to reuse this because it was actually doing exactly what we wanted it to do. We just need to tell the server that the server needs to respect that we've created these parts in the workspace. So I'm going to delete all of this, and what we're going to do now is create an event. And see it Roblox already knows that this is what we're going to do. We're going to create an event. So first what I'm going to do is actually create the event. It's good to store your events in the replicated storage. So we're going to come over here to replicated storage. I won't go into detail about why it's good to store them here. All you need to know is that Roblox recommends it. So we're going to click here, right click, insert object. And it already knows that I like to put remote events in the replicated storage. So you can search it or you can just click it here if it came up for you. And then we'll need to rename this remote event. So I will be calling this event place part event. Okay, pretty self-explanatory, and that's what you want your events to be. You want them to be very specific. So we've created a place part event. Now what we're going to do is come back to our local script, and we're going to make a variable reference to that event. So we'll say local place part event equals game.replicated storage. I'll hit tab to accept that. Place part event. It came up there. So now I've got a reference to that event. All I need to do now is say, once I, the player who is responsible for my mouse, click, once I activate the tool, tell the server that I've clicked, that I've activated the tool. So we'll say place part event fire server right here. And then the one thing that I do want to pass to the server is the thing that I'm responsible for, right? It's my mouse. So I'm going to tell the server, here is the mouse. And I'm not just going to give it the mouse, I'm also going to give it where the mouse was clicked. So I'm going to say mouse.hit.position. And that's all we need to do on the client side. So I'll rename the script and we'll call it spawn at mouse events. And then I'm going to create another script. I'll just put it in the tool. You could put this script in server script service, but since this is a tool, I'm going to put the script in the tool. So that way, wherever this tool is, no matter what game I put it in, the tool always works. So I'm going to right click here, insert object, I'll type script, and we want this script again. And we will rename this to spawn at mouse server. And I'll hit enter. Now I've got this script here, so we're going to delete the default hello world, and we're going to start writing our server script. So first thing we need to do is actually create a reference to this place part event, and we can actually just copy that from our other script. So this is what we want right here, the local place part event. So I'll get this, copy, go back to my spawn at mouse server. Again, this is the server script, and we'll paste this here. Next, what I'm going to do is go down a couple lines, and I will reference that place part event. And this time we want to do on server event. So what this means is when the server is called from this event, we will connect, just like we've been doing before, and we'll write function. And then inside this function, this event, when it happens for the server, it takes a player as one of the parameters. So this is the first, it has to be the first parameter, is the player that called on the server. So we'll just put player here for their parameter reference. And then Roblox is trying to help me out once again, but this is actually not what I want. So I'm just going to ignore that, and I'm going to type space, and then I will type mouse position. Okay, and then I'll close my parenthesis and hit enter. And it will put that end there for me, which is helpful because we need to close this function with an end. Now what I'm doing is the parameters are accepting the player object and we're accepting the mouse position. The reason that the mouse position is here is because we passed mouse position over when we hit tool.activated. So this is the mouse position, right? So when we fire server, we are sending the mouse position over here. We have to accept the player as the first parameter, but we're also accepting the mouse position, which is the only parameter we explicitly passed on the fire server event. So we will come back over here and we will type in local part equals instance.new parenthesis quotation part. Okay, now this time the reason this is going to work is because the server is the one that's creating the part, and that's what we want. When the server creates the part, all players will see the part created. Okay, so now we'll just do everything that we were doing before, right? We'll say part.parent equals workspace. We need to tell the part that it needs to exist in the physical world, and we will say part.position equals mouse position. This is the reason that we passed the mouse object to the place part event server call. So this way we could reference in the server where we want the part to exist in the physical world, right? So now what we've got is the completion of our tool, really. So if we come back here to test, we can hit start with 2 players once again. And now if I equip my tool and I click, all of a sudden parts are creating and both players can see them, right? So now it makes sense why that player is up above me. It's because he's on a part. So every time I click, it's creating more parts. And you might notice that it's actually creating 2 parts right now. And the reason that that's happening is because I am responsible for the mouse for both of these clients. So I actually have 2 clients here, which means that it's creating 2 parts. Because I own both clients, the server is recognizing essentially 2 inputs, 2 clicks for every time I click just once. So I can actually prove that if I just close this client here, now there's only 1 client here, I can click and now only 1 part is getting created. And that's because the other client is not there, right? So I'm only sending one request to the server that I'm clicking. And that's pretty much it. So to quickly recap, the first thing we did was whenever we activated the tool, we created a part in the physical world in workspace. What we wanted to do from there was create a part wherever we clicked. So we created a local script so that way we could get the player's mouse, and then using the same methods, every time we activated the tool, we created a part in the workspace at the player's mouse click position. From there we ran into the issue that because the part was created from the client, the server was not acknowledging that the part was created, and so the parts were only being created for the client that created the part. They were only showing on that player's screen. Now, on everyone else's screen, we could still see that the player was rising in the air. They were sort of levitating. And the reason that that happens is because each client, each player is responsible for their own mouse and for their own player. They're responsible for their own characteristics, really. And so even though on player 1's screen, they saw that they were standing on a pile of parts, player 2 saw that there were no parts there, but that player 1 was still positioned where player 1's screen was showing them. And again, that is because player 1 is the one that's responsible for where their own position is in the physical world. So to fix this issue, we had to separate the client and the server into their own objects and use an event to communicate between the 2 of them. So we created this local script that just created a call to the server, and then we created this server script that accepted the call from the client and took the client's mouse position. That way we knew when we created our part in the server for all players to see, we could still place that part at the client's mouse position because the client told us where their mouse position was at. And that resulted in the creation of the part at the mouse whenever we activated the tool for all players to see. And so you can actually have some fun with this. So I'll go ahead and quickly cover some things that you can do to mix things up with this a little bit, just kind of as a bonus. So what this is going to do is introduce some variety to our script. So if you want to know quickly, all I'm doing here is making the color and the size of the part that's created vary. So math.random calls a random number between these two bounds. So this would be the minimum bound and the maximum bound. So we can create any number between 0 and 255. Same thing here, we can create any number between 1 and 10, and it will just choose at random which number it wants to use. Anything between 1 and 10 is going to work. So now if I come back to here and hit play, and if I open up my tool, I can start clicking and it will create various parts of many different sizes and many different colors. And now it's getting really fun, right? Because I can just keep placing parts and they'll come in at random colors, random sizes, and it's really colorful and fun. If you're a little frustrated with your parts kind of falling over like this, we can fix it by setting part.anchored equals true. And what that will do is make it so we can't push over our parts. Maybe you like the pushing over of parts, but this makes it so that we can't push over them. Of course, it gives me a flat part that I can't even really, you can't push this. And here's another little part, but you can see this one's stuck to the ground, right? So this is a bigger one. This will help more. So now I can, I can really start having some fun with this here. I can build, there was a lot of little parts in a row. I can build way up and start making myself a fun little tower. And no one can push this over, and other players would be able to see this tower in game. That's going to conclude everything for our tutorial today. I hope that you were able to learn from this. I hope that this kind of sheds some light over the difference between the client and the server and how those two communicate to each other, and really just kind of helped you to see the progression from the very basics of just creating a part to creating a part exactly where you want it and making it so that all players can see it. You can really control who gets to see the parts and how the parts behave. So please leave a like and leave a comment if you have any questions or if there are other tutorials that you'd like to see.